Okay, guys, today we're going to be going through the top 10 potential raid bosses of Shurima for the Riot MMO. We went through Targon yesterday. Now it's time to go through Shurima. We're going to go over a couple potential raids, not just dungeons, but raid encounters that could happen within Shurima for the Riot MMO. I think that Shurima is going to come at launch, so we may see these pretty early on into release. And so I do want to give some background. Crossing the scorching sands, Shurima is a land of myth. A fallen empire reborn from the dust of millennia. Its vast deserts conceal buried tombs, forgotten magic, and beings of terrifying power. For players in the Riot MMO, the sprawling sands of Shurima present a landscape ripe with epic dungeons and world-spanning raids. From brutal wasteland marauders to god warriors twisted by madness, the threats here are as ancient as the sun itself. Drawing from the rich lore of Runeterra, we speculate on the 10 most formidable encounters that could await adventurers brave enough to challenge the might of the Desert Empire. And I don't think you get to fight all of these in Shurima unless you push yourself, but especially when we start getting to the end, we get to some powerful guys. The Empire of Shurima was once a thriving civilization that spanned an entire continent. After several thousand years of growth and prosperity, the failed ascension of Shurima's last emperor left the capital in ruins, and tales of the Empire's former glory became little more than myth. Still a handful dare to dream of a return to the old ways. Indeed, more recently the tribes have been stirred by whispers from the heart of the desert that the Emperor Azir has returned to lead them into a new, wondrous age. And you gotta remember that Shurima did have a rise, a fall, and now a rise again. Before its fall, Shurima's power was centralized in the Sun Disk, a source of celestial magic that empowered its greatest champions, the Ascended. This golden age was brought to a cataclysmic end by a betrayal. So the Sun Disk was not what we see today. There was a Sun Disk. It was raised in Shurima a long time ago. And whether the Shrimans know this or not, I'm not sure. But we do know that the power of the Sun Disk comes from Aurelian Soul, who we talked about in the last video with the top 10 raid bosses for Targon. And the Sun Disk literally pulls Aurelian Soul's power into it and gives that to mortals, making them ascended, immortal god warriors. So that's how it works. And the fall of an empire. So we had the Sun Disk, but then this happened. In ancient Shurima, young Emperor Azir was persuaded by Xerath, his mages, to attempt the fabled ascension ritual, despite ancient warnings to do so only in times of direst threat. Azir's hubris proved disastrous. As the Sun Disk focused the dawn's rays into a transformative beam, Xerath betrayed Azir, shoving his emperor aside and stealing its power for himself. In an instant, Azir was obliterated, and Xerath remained as a spectral being of pure malevolent energy, as the city around them was swallowed whole by the desert. Nasus and Renekton, ascended heroes of Shuriman legend, sensed in an instant that something had gone terribly wrong and rushed to the Sun Disk. They hurried Xerath into a chained sarcophagus, but the mages shattered it into shards. Renekton dragged Xerath into the Tomb of the Emperors and shouted to Nasus to seal the door. With a heavy heart, Nasus entombed his brother with a madman in the buried ruins for all eternity, or so he believed. But that's where we're at, guys. So we got Azir, now you know Nasus and Renekton, their story, you know Xerath, so we're covering a lot of characters here. Azir's resurrection and Shurima reborn. Millennia later, the spilt blood of Azir's last descendant resurrected the Emperor, and with his return, the capital city rose from the sands, and the Sun Disk shone once more. This is Sivir. This is the last descendant of Azir. And she went into the Tomb of the Emperors, and she wound up like getting stabbed. And Azir actually saves her life, and in return, this kind of happens. Because Azir finds her bleeding out. Her blood literally resurrects him. He finds her bleeding out, and then he takes her to like these healing pools. And that's where we're at now. He brought her to the healing pool and to try to like save her life. now Azir has been resurrected. And what's the first thing Azir does? I love this scene. Raises the sun disk from the sand. Yeah, I always thought that was awesome. And then I want to show you guys this that I did not include in the article. This was the sun disk before Azir raised it. The ruins of Shurima, its once grand palaces and citadels cast to ruin. You could see it like buried. But Azir brings it back. And this image that you see at the top of the Shuriman page, this picture, is right here. These are the people of Shurima returning to the sun disk after it's been raised up from the sands by Azir, like returning to their ancestral homeland. The people of Shurima were really, they were like, the people of Shurima honestly were the most powerful nation in the world by miles and miles and miles. When Azir last reigned, I mean, Shurima ruled the world. For Azir to return and see it in rubble, the people scattered in the sands, the void corrupted underneath it, which we'll get into. The void corruption spreading, like the people, Shurima is one of the weakest nations in current lore. Honestly, look at the map. They're not even, they used to control like all of, like this whole southern continent was controlled by Shurima, you know? Ishtar was like a buddy, an ally in a way. And Acathia was under their rule. But now, I mean, you go here, look, Shurima's already lost, like, this piece looks like it's part of Noxus. Noxus is expanding in Shurima. Belzoon and Tereshni are already theirs. They've definitely lost their touch, I'll say that. Time to get into the top 10 raid bosses for the Riot MMO that would exist in Shurima. And we're going from weakest to most powerful, guys. So this is like the weakest raid boss that we'll face. And then at the end, you'll see the most powerful raid boss that we'll face. And then if there are any, we talk about the characters that are way too powerful that you'll never fight within Shurima. So the first one is the Sandthrasher Warband. I'm aware that's not like a character, but that's like these guys, the Sandthrashers. Here, you can see them a little bit in here. These are the Sandthrashers. You can see this guy running out of here. You can see like a Renekton crocodile mouth there. Lower it a little bit. That's a Sandthrasher. You can see him on the crocodile there. Yeah. That's a Sandthrasher. They ride the crocodiles. I assume that will be a mount that you'll get at the end of the Sandthrasher raid. And it also really gives me Shurima vibes. Like, just, they seem the most basic, natural Shurima, right? It's not like you're going too far into extreme. You get the sand desert people kind of thing. A crocodile would be a great first mount when you get into Shurima. So it just seems like a win-win-win across the board. And I think we'll stop right there because we'll come back to this, guys. So these are the Sandthrashers. There's Raz Bloodmane, who you just saw in that cinematic. When this croc was born, the others took bets on how long he'd live, assuming he was the runt of the litter and a freak to boot. No, nobody thought to bet on him eating all his siblings. So the Sandthrashers definitely have an interesting culture, right, to explore. Then there's this character, Bloodthirsty Marauder. The Sandthrashers do everything with their companions: fight, hunt, kill, and eat. These are cards from Legends of Runeterra, and what I'm reading is like the description for the cards. The card art has like a small description for it. Then there's this character, Callous Bone Crusher. The soldier struggled as he reached for his spear, but she leaned harder on his chest until he ceased groaning. "No, no," she admonished, showing her sharpened eye teeth with a wicked smile. "This is mine now." And you can see her taking the spear from him. And this guy's he's wearing like the purple colors. That's after Azir's already risen and people are becoming loyal to Azir and joining his army. The Sandthrashers are not with him. And here's the last one. That would be an awesome mount. Maybe like the crocodiles can be like the basic raid mount. You know, completing the raid will get you that mount. But if you beat it on like a very hard difficulty, this could be like the ahead of the curve mount kind of thing. Merciless Hunter. And there, tied up nice and pretty, Renekton likes his meals delivered still squirming. Clearly, these people are very loyal to Renekton, judging by this card, right? So keep that in mind. Raid encounter analysis. The Sandthrashers are more than mere bandits. They're cohesive and brutal warband perfectly suited for a dynamic multi-boss raid encounter. The fight wouldn't be against one leader, but a council of the pack's alphas, like the fearsome Raz Bloodmane and the ruthless Anukta. This is Anukta, by the way. That's the character's name. That's Anukta. Players would face them and their giant Sauron mounts in a ruined cityscape. The encounter could feature phases where players must separate the riders from their mounts, deal with coordinated pack tactics, and survive the onslaught of a warband. As the story with Teeth shows, only the strongest survive. They actually appear in that story, and I linked to it here. Aurora Halunatis. This is just a creature that I thought was really cool in Shurima that I think would be a great raid boss or perhaps a world boss. I always like the idea of world bosses in MMO. You know, you're just running around, you see this massive thing flying, and you know, it'll kill you if you get too close, but you get a nice group together. So this could be a raid boss or a world boss. Aurora Halunatis. He tells me that the bird is brilliantly colored with a wingspan as long as a man is tall. To look into its eyes, he confides in me one night, is to understand that you are prey. And that's from Anura's field journal. Anura is just a girl that walks around Shurima, and she has like these notes. And these are her notes on Aurora Halunatis. So the raid encounter, this mystical avian creature is a perfect candidate for an aerial raid boss. The encounter could take place atop a windswept mesa or within a vast open-roofed ruin. The Aurora Halunatis would be highly mobile, forcing the raid to constantly reposition. Its brilliantly colored plumage could be a key mechanic, perhaps requiring players to align with a certain colors to avoid devastating attacks or to break its defense. The final warning that it took into its eyes is to become prey. Scream's a gaze-based mechanic where players who fail to look away are hit with a powerful debuff or mind control effect, turning them against their allies. So I think that'd be an easy. Aurora Halunatis, I feel like massive boss, really different, unique, and if not a raid boss, could definitely be a world boss. Okay, number 8, the Bakai Coven. This is the raid. Okay, this is the Bakai are some of my favorite characters in all of Runeterra. I really mean that, and I think that this would be the raid that I look forward to the most. If we get into the Riot MMO and Shurima is in the game, and the Bakai are not a raid, like a full raid that they announce at launch, I'm gonna lose my mind, because the Bakai are just awesome, and their lore touches on so much stuff that will like really give you deep dives into like the history of Shurima. So the Bakai are a must in my opinion. If you're gonna go to Shurima, the Bakai raid. This is the Bakai Reaper. Again, these are all from Legends of Runeterra. The Bakai all fled or were spared following their failed ascension. So the Bakai were just like Azir and Nasus, right? These are ascended god warriors that use the Sun Disc, Power of Brilliant Soul, to become ascended god warriors. They're chosen in Shurima. It's not just randomly picked up people and tell them, hey, you're going to be ascended. These people served Shurima very well and then were chosen to become ascended god warriors. That's how Nasus and Renekton became god warriors. Azir was never chosen. He was the emperor, and he said, I want to be ascended. And he was convinced in the background by Xerath, who kind of manipulated him to do it. And there's a whole story there that I can get into. But you just have to know that Xerath was kind of a lower class civilian, and he always resented the upper class, like the Azir and the emperors and the ruling class, the ruling family and all that stuff. Because, you know, he was poor and he was brought up. It's almost like Zahn resents Piltover. That same kind of vibe in Shurima, where the lower class, some of them really resented the upper class. And Xerath was in that boat. And so he intended to convince Azir to join the Ascension Ritual and then steal the power for himself. But these guys were chosen to be ascended and then just didn't work for them. They became what are known as Bakai, who are like kind of, they're ascended, but then they're not as powerful as like an Azir or a Nasus. And they're almost like looked down upon by the people in Shurima. So the Bakai all fled or were spared following their failed ascension, and none have seen them since. Who knows how long they have hidden in those dark tombs, bearing the mark of their shame. And so this is like someone writing about them in the history of the Ascended Host. Then there's this one. I mean, look at that, guys. Some of these images scream raid boss to me, and this is one of them. The rampaging Bakai. The bearer of a grudge's resentment only deepens, even if those they bear the grudge against are no longer dead. You could see him going against a couple of Sandthrashers in here as well. Bakai Sand Spinner. Each grain she spills takes a second from their lives, wearing away at them like wind. Easy raid boss. Like, I can imagine 100% like a mechanic where the sand spinner is throwing out these sands and people are taking damage, and then, you know, maybe you can have like an aging mechanic in there. It sucked to leave with your character as an elderly person, but something like that. Perhaps after you kill the sand spinner, you get all those years back. It'd be cool to see your character age in the raid. That'd be awesome. This one's really interesting because this Bakai is all the way in Ionia. You can tell from the image that this is like showing some remnants of the battle with the Titans, with the Vastaya Shirei. So the Forsaken Bakai. In his hand, he clutched a braided belt, a gift from his friend Rost before their ascension ceremony. But even as he revered the Darken's power, he harbored a secret resentment in his beastly heart. A gift from his friend Rost. Rost became a Darken. So Rost was an Ascended like Nasus or Renekton. After the Void War, some of the Ascended become Darken, which is like, you can see Aatrox over here. Aatrox is a Darken. And basically they're just people that, during the war with Acathia, so there was a Void War with Acathia down here. And the reason this happens is because Acathia is kind of under Shurima's boot the whole time, and they revolt eventually. And during the revolution, they're obviously losing because Shurima's way more powerful than them just naturally with an army, let alone the Ascended God Warriors. So they get wrecked, and to counteract that wreckedness, they summon the Void, thinking that it'll help them, like the secret weapon. But the Void just destroys Acathia, as well as Shurima alike. Shurima does manage to stop the Void. They don't win this war. They just kind of halt it in place, thanks to like one of the Ascended Harak, but I'm not going to get into that. But they managed to stop the Void in place, at least for now. But the thing is, they were already corrupted. Like, a lot of the Ascended that were battling the Void became corrupted by it. And those ones that became corrupted by it, to the point where like they started changing their bodies and stuff like that, and using blood magic and all this, they become Darken, who are evil, and they kind of want to rule the world. Their minds are so twisted and gone. It's not like intentional, but it's almost like their goals have been contorted into a bad way. And you can tell from this Salt of the Earth. One of the few known ways to combat the Void is to starve it. With no organic or magical sustenance nearby, the Void's material growth will slow until it eventually falls into a dormant state. And that's why if you're in Shurima today, in the real world, we're talking about like the world of Runeterra when we enter it, Acathia technically isn't on any of the maps in Shurima. They erased it from existence. They don't want anyone to even know it exists anymore because they don't want the Void to awaken. So I hope that when we enter the Riot MMO, and if they release Shurima at launch, I want Acathia not to show up on the world map. I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, this one's interesting because it mentions Rost as well. Then this is the last one. Easy raid boss, look at him. The Bakai Witherclaw. Their sanity withered away like dunes in the wind, and in its place a seed of anger flourished into a fury no desert waters could quench. So they kind of have that, okay, you know, they're definitely raid bosses size-wise, power-wise. They're not like as powerful as Ascended, but you know, they can go into like this tomb. Maybe we need something from one of these tombs, but their minds are so twisted, right? We have to go through them to get to it. And it'll be like a stepping stone into a further raid. So I do think the Bakai will be one of the earlier ones. We put them at number 8. A lot more powerful characters to come. The Bakai are the tragic failures of the Ascension ritual, twisted into monstrous forms. A raid focus on them would be a descent into a dark, forgotten tomb, culminating not in a single boss fight, but a series of them. A Bakai Council. Each boss would represent a different aspect of their failed transformation. The Bakai Sandspinner can manipulate time and age players. The Rampaging Bakai would be a pure rage and damage check. The Witherclaw might apply debilitating debuffs. The final encounter could involve all surviving members of the Coven, forcing the raid to manage multiple threats in a chaotic, overlapping battle against these eternally resentful beings. And you know, just because these are the characters that are already present, right, in Legends of Runeterra or League of Legends, doesn't mean they can't add to it, right? These are just the Bakai that we know. There could definitely be like a very powerful Bakai who's kind of like a leader that we end up fighting at the very end. Next up, Damien, the Unbound. I love this guy. Look how cool he looks. If you know the lore, you already know kind of who he ties into, but I think he deserves a raid all on his own. At each place of power shall we draw forth the magical energy of the land. and in so doing bolster our great emperor's armies. And who is he talking about? He's talking about Xerath, guys, who's a character that's going to come up a little bit later. But this guy is definitely loyal to Xerath. Servant of the Magus. So there's a risen altar. At each place of power shall an obelisk be raised, an instrument through which the Magus Ascendant may draw the power from beneath the sands. And this is from the Herald of the Magus talking. That's a risen altar. And so I think that you're going to have this guy, Damien the Unbound. He's going to be protecting these risen altars, which are literally giving freaking Xerath more power. If he's not already freaking powerful enough, this is giving him even more power. And they're using that to raise with these obelisks that are taking the power from the sand. And I hope that that'll tie into where that power is coming from and what's beneath the sands, which is the Lavender Sea. So that could be really interesting to play on and could tie into something in the future. So I hope that they do that. But yeah, there's these risen altars. This is a Herald of the Magus. That's the one that was talking about the risen altar. The Herald spread her arms wide as she lifted her face to the sun, which hung bloody and red above Shurima. Hail, the Magus Ascendant. She breathed beatifically, her voice echoing off the ring of ruined columns. Hail, Xerath. Here's another one. This is the Ruinous Acolyte. All of Xerath's acolytes gave something of themselves in exchange for power, but the most powerful devotees were hardly more than husks of their former selves, serving as both conduit and power source for their new emperor's energy. And here's the last one, the Waste Walker. The acolytes had been accomplished before they sought out Xerath. Now that they had studied what he had once studied himself, they were unstoppable. So these are all people loyal to Xerath. They are literally batteries, yeah. I just wonder where those batteries are getting their power from. Raid and counter analysis. Don't forget we're talking about Damien the Unbound, kind of like one of the most powerful servants of Xerath. Damien serves not himself, but a greater, more sinister power. This elemental being would serve as a fantastic dungeon final or early raid boss. The encounter would center around the lore of the risen altars. Damien would be an invulnerable while drawing power from several altars scattered around the arena. The raid would need to split its forces, sending teams to destroy the altars while the main force tanks Damien and manages his summoned acolytes. Destroying an altar could weaken him, but also trigger a new, more dangerous ability, making the fight a strategic race against his growing power and a perfect prelude to facing his true master. What's your favorite faction in Shurima? The Bakai. I love the Bakai. I think that they're just like an interesting group. They have a lot of really interesting lore with them, with their characters. This person's literally, each grain she spills takes a second of time from their lives, wearing away at them like wind. So the Bakai raid is going to be one of the coolest raids in Shurima, and definitely my favorite faction in Shurima. Anyone who says the Xerxai is just insane. I'm sure someone's gonna be like, my favorite faction is the Xerxai, you absolute madman. That's Damien the Unbound. Next up, Xerxereth, the Under Titan. Absolutely a freaking raid boss. I think this one deserves just like a raid by itself. One of those raids that you walk in and the only fight is the raid boss, I think would be really cool, would be this one. But what monster could do such a thing? Shuriman Historian. That's all the card freaking reads. But look at it. That's a raid boss, guys. This is a classic giant monster raid boss. Having annihilated an entire outpost, Xerxereth is a pure force of destruction. The battle would take place in the massive crater it left behind, the terrain itself being a hazard. This would be a fight against scale. Players would need to dodge ground-shattering stomps, tail whips that demolish parts of the arena, and burrowing attacks that threaten to swallow the entire raid. The key to victory might involve using siege weapons to ground the beast, or even climbing on top of its massive body to attack crystalline weak points along its spine. I would love to see something like this where like the actual map itself kind of changes, right? Like the arena that you're fighting in, it doesn't stay the same. It kind of changes as the fight goes on, like ground demolishing parts of the arena. That's really cool. Rek'Sai's hubby? I mean, maybe. The Dune Swallower. Another one. Another big bad. You're starting to get into the Void stuff. And you touch on the Void in Shurima, and I think it's just like a taste of the Void in Shurima, but then the real Void comes in the next expansion, which I'll talk about. It is rarely documented, likely for the fact that it can swallow entire dunes and any witnesses whole. This one's literally eating a Xerxai. The fight with the Duneswallow would be a terrifying encounter with a subterranean predator. The majority of the battle would be spent trying to force it to the surface, using sonic devices or causing cave-ins. When it does surface, it's a frantic DPS phase before it burrows again. Its signature mechanic would be swallowing players or parts of the raid, transporting them to a stomach-like mini-arena, where they must damage its internal organs to be expelled, all while dealing with digestive acids and smaller parasites. It's a fight against the environment as much as the boss itself. I mean, I just try to think of ways that, because literally this little Xerxai that it's eating is bigger than it. So there has to be like a way to kind of scale it to match the players, because you're just not even going to be able to hit its foot, right? That's the Dune Swallower. Very cool. And I do think the Dune Swallower will also be a raid boss. Naafiri. Now we're getting into some Darkin. I already explained to you guys like what the Darkin are with Aatrox and Rost, and Naafiri is another Darkin example. This is how she looks. She's like a pack of dogs. Separately, the dogs would starve. Together, they were an apex predator, feasting on whatever game they fancied. There were no individuals. The pack was the entity that dominated all. And this is like a Naafiri cinematic. So this is what happened with Naafiri. She was in a dagger in a tomb, right? She was trapped. The Darkin weapons, so Darkin were imprisoned in their weapons and then kind of placed all over Runeterra in hidden places, hoping that no one would ever find them again. Naafiri was put into a tomb in Shurima, and this guy freaking found it and is carrying it with him. Naafiri literally called these dogs here to try to get the guy to grab her. So her hope here was that he would have grabbed the dagger so she can possess him, because the Darkin work like that, right? They're trapped in their weapons, and if someone grabs them or holds on to them, they become possessed by them. But instead of grabbing the dagger, he grabs his sword. Yeah, and the dogs really kill this guy. He's dead. But she becomes literally a pack of dogs instead of one individual. And it's like really jarring for her. But then she realizes the power of the pack.
And make a choice. Either give up or give chase.
So here she kind of accepts it, and she's like, I am the pack. And she really values like their unity. Now she's a pack of dogs.
But together, we feast.
Yeah. And that's Naafiri's goal now, is to unite all the Darkin. Because she thinks like together they'll rule the world. But separately, they'll lose. Naafiri raid encounter analysis. Naafiri presents a truly unique raid concept, fighting a shared consciousness. The raid wouldn't face a single Darkin, but her entire pack of Dunehounds, all acting as one. The encounter would be a masterclass in ad control and spatial awareness. The pack would share one health bar, but players would need to damage many individual hounds. Mechanics would revolve around the pack's hive mind. If players group up too much, they're vulnerable to AoE attacks. If they spread out too much, individual players become lone prey. They are targeted for immense burst damage, and the key would be finding the balance, breaking the pack's cohesion to create windows of vulnerability. So, Naafiri sounds like a great raid boss to me, very unique. She's one of the only like Darkin that's multiple formed, and dealing with a pack with like a hive mind going on seems like a very difficult raid boss, and that's why she's all the way up here at number 4. And now we're approaching the top 3, guys. Top 3 most powerful raid bosses that I think will come out of Shurima for the Riot MMO. Number 3, Renekton, the Butcher of the Sands. Piece by piece, Renekton's sanity cracked. Xerath drove a wedge into these cracks, twisting his perception of what was real and what was imagined. You guys remember we talked about this at the beginning of the video. Renekton sacrificed himself to imprison Xerath after Azir. He pushes Azir out of the way, steals the power of the Sun Disk during the Ascension ritual. That kills Azir. And then over here, Nasus has to shut the door. It says, Renekton dragged Xerath into the Tomb of the Emperors and shouted to Nasus to seal the door. With a heavy heart, Nasus entombed his brother with a madman in the buried ruins for all eternity. Now, what resurrects Azir? You have to remember that what resurrects Azir is this. Sivir. Sivir enters a forgotten tomb, and she's betrayed by Cassiopeia, who's another character, gets stabbed in the back. But she also, her Chalakar, the weapon, is what opens the tomb to Xerath and Renekton. And remember, Azir saves her. And so Azir and Xerath and Renekton all come back into play in Shurima at the same time. And then Azir raises the Sun Disc. So all these players come back all at once. All these characters, Xerath, Renekton, are in a tomb. Azir is dead. Azir gets resurrected, and Xerath and Renekton come back into play, all from the same event, which is Sivir entering that forgotten tomb and being betrayed by Cassiopeia. And so Renekton was trapped with Xerath for a long time, and so Xerath really messed with his mind. Remember this guy? We saw him. We were talking about the sand people that are loyal to Renekton. Well, he got away from one of them. And here's Renekton. So what this guy's holding is like a little talisman, and it doesn't actually have any power, but the people of Shurima believe that to be the true emperor of Shurima, you need to be holding this talisman. And somehow the sand people that are loyal to Renekton got it, right? Everyone's got their own goals. You gotta remember, Xerath's people, they want Xerath to rule. They want Xerath to rule Shurima, right? They call him the emperor. Then you got freaking the Sandthrashers. They want Renekton to rule Shurima. They believe he should be in control. And then there's people that are loyal to Azir. And so all these powers are kind of going against each other. Nasus is loyal to Azir. But yeah, so the Sandthrashers managed to get a hold of this relic. And it looks like Azir's people, one of his soldiers, was trying to steal it for him. Yeah, I almost lost a limb. I don't want to distract you guys by that. Can I pause this? Pause it really quick. Yeah, so he falls into the library of Nasus. These are Bakai. Bakai, a lot of them are loyal to Nasus. Not all of them, but some of them are. And they guard this library. What's that, ice? No, it's not ice. It's sand. I feel like... These are two brothers fighting. How awesome is that? And there's Azir. And now he has the relic that the people of Shurima need to be able to see him with, to know that he is the true emperor of Shurima and the person they should be following. Shows the relic off. The Emperor has returned. Pretty awesome cinematic. And these are just some of Renekton's level up animations within Legends of Runeterra. You can see he looks pretty cool. Just going off. Yeah. Looks like he's fighting like some mini Nasus characters and winning. Raid encounter analysis. A confrontation with Renekton would be a tragic and epic battle, not of destruction, but of salvation. Players would join his brother Nasus in an attempt to subdue the Madden Butcher. You gotta remember, Renekton wasn't bad, okay? He was a good guy. He was on Azir's side. He pulled Xerath into a tomb to protect his emperor. The problem is he was trapped in a freaking tomb for years with a madman who was corrupting his mind. And so I think it'd be sad just to kill Renekton and treat him as like a bad guy. I think he needs to be saved. The raid's goal would be not to kill Renekton, but to survive his onslaught long enough for Nasus to complete a binding ritual. The encounter would be a desperate defense. Tanks would have to endure Renekton's relentless rage, while healers keep Nasus alive. DPS players would focus on breaking Renekton's armor or interrupting his most devastating attacks to buy Nasus more time. The fight would end not with a death blow, but with a successful capture of a fallen hero, a somber victory against the darkness that consumed him. I think that I would like to see Renekton go that way. Renekton, I hope we save him. Rek'Sai, the Void Burrower. Again, another character that I really feel like Shurima's going to come definitely before Icathia. And so we're going to touch on the Psychalik. We're going to touch on some of these characters like Rek'Sai. I don't think we'll kill Rek'Sai, but we'll definitely fight her. And then that'll kind of push us into Icathia post saving Shurima. And this is Rek'Sai, the Void Burrower. And this is her animation when she levels up in Legends of Runeterra. Look at her bursting from the ground. That's awesome. That's an awesome shot. Fear, not ambush from the hills, nor winged beast from the skies. The true terror of Shurima comes from the sand and gives no warning of her presence. That's Sivir's line about him. A raid encounter with Rek'Sai. A raid on Rek'Sai would be a terrifying descent into the void-infested tunnels of the Psychalik. The environment itself would be an enemy, with collapsing tunnels and swarms of smaller Xerxai. The final encounter with the Queen would be a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Rek'Sai would spend much of the fight burrowed, using tremor senses to hunt the players. Raiders would need to use sonic emitters to cause localized cave-ins to force her to the surface. Once exposed, it's a frantic burn phase before she burrows again, leaving behind a network of tunnels she can use to ambush the raid from any direction. It's a fight that demands constant vigilance and control of the battlefield. And I put a couple Xerxai down here. So you can see her here. This is like literally a cinematic that just shows Rek'Sai. And I think it gives you an idea, a really good idea of how powerful she is. Hold on. Right here. So these are people walking in the sands. I need to figure out how to make it full screen. I'll figure that out for the next stream. These people are walking in the sands. The desert. Looks like traders. You got this guy, he's a bit higher, elevated. He's kind of a lookout. He's supposed to be looking for any danger. Yeah. Those are smaller Xerxai that are feeding on them. Yeah. Look how far she is before she makes it all the way over here. So that guy is not going to be in the Riot MMO, but that gives you an idea of how she hunts and what she does in freaking Shurima. So yeah, it's a problem. You can also see her in the call. I don't think I can play the music, but that's also Rek'Sai. I think it's more to scale of how she is in Runeterra. And that's her battle with Kaisa and Talia. And that's all you see of her, really. The Xerxai Dunebreaker. See, there's a couple of Xerxai. These are ones that Rek'Sai is like, they're like her children almost. So this is the Xerxai Dunebreaker. While all Xerxai are able tunnelers, only the Dunebreakers have the mass and power needed to break through the veins of solid bedrock that snake through the Great Sai and open up the lands beyond for further hunting. And this is the Great Sai, the Sai-Leek. This is where all the Xerxai are located, which makes sense, right? This is where the Void is, this is where Kathia is, and the Xerxai are kind of this area. This is their territory. I definitely think we will have to go here and deal with them. This is another one. The Xerxai Caller. Not all Xerxai are born to butcher. Some can summon their kin with piercing shrieks that rattle the sands as well as the senses. So you can see these ones. The Xerxai Caller, they see these hunters or gatherers, these two people running over here. And so they are calling the Xerxai Dunebreakers and maybe some Xerxai hatchlings to feed on them. These are Xerxai hatchlings, so they're babies. Once the caravan has been disabled, the hunters will occasionally retreat and allow their hatchlings to forage forward. It is here that the young Xerxai refine their instincts, learning which sounds are of the desert and which signal their prey. So basically they disabled this caravan and then they let the hatchlings go in to eat them. Do you think Legends of Runeterra is a blueprint for the Riot MMO concept? 100%. That's why I keep going back to all these Legends of Runeterra cards. The Bakai are literally only in Legends of Runeterra. The Dune Swallows only in Legends of Runeterra. The Servants of the Magus, Damien the Unbound is a character in Legends of Runeterra. The Aurora Halunatis. I think Legends of Runeterra is the base. And this is her in Legends of Runeterra. Young Jahura was exploring, as is his way, and in a small hidden cave discovering some ancient texts, we took them to a translator in Marlwork and the Scrolls. They speak of an ancient terror who stalked our ancestors, a queen, a Xerxai queen. And this is, look at her, freaking hunting. We have known of her terror for generations, but for our ancestors to know her too, how old must she be? How many of our people has she butchered? The thought unsettles me greatly. And this is like the Rek'Sai call, the pack card, and she can summon the pack to her. May the sun shine and may the Xerxai sleep. That's a merchant's prayers. Number 1, Xerath, the Magus Ascendant. Look at Xerath. I think he is number 1, absolutely. He will be like the final raid boss in the Riot MMO. Absolutely, without question. Look at his level up animations in Legends of Runeterra. He's a great character, a ton of backstory. He's relatable. Like he's not like, he didn't start out bad, guys. You gotta remember, Xerath started from poverty, from the poor of the poor. He was a servant to Azir. And so he always felt like, you know, he wanted to change Shurima for the better. He just got corrupted along the way. But his goal wasn't bad. His goal was pure. He wanted to overthrow Azir and fix Shurima. He saw Azir as a problem, even though he didn't hate Azir as an individual. Like when he first started talking to Azir, he actually liked him. But as he you know, got more time, he said, okay, you know, Azir's not a bad guy, but I can't stop my plan. I need to save Shurima from this constant freaking level of corruption, as he saw it. So a lifetime as a slave has prepared him for eternity as your master, Xerath. He was literally a slave. So the ultimate Shuriman threat, a raid against Xerath, would be the capstone of an entire expansion taking place within the newly opened Tomb of the Emperors, where he once was imprisoned. The raid would first face his most powerful lieutenants like the Waste Walkers and Damien. The final fight against Xerath himself would be a multi-stage marathon against pure arcane power. Phase 1 would involve shattering the sarcophagus shards that bind and contain his form. Phase 2 would unleash his true power, forcing the raid to navigate a storm of arcane missiles and lightning. The final phase could see him shatter reality within the tomb, forcing players to fight across fractured platforms suspended in a vortex of raw magic. Defeating Xerath would be a monumental task, saving not just Shurima, but all of Runeterra from his mad ambition. Tests of strength, allies, and proving grounds. So not every powerful being in Shurima is an enemy to be slain. Some are potential allies or gatekeepers who would test adventurers' strength and resolve before allowing them to face the true threats to the Empire. These encounters would be less about killing a boss and more about proving one's worth. You have Nasus, the curator of the sands, and here's his level up animations in Legends of Runeterra. You can see Nasus coming up, and you remember in Renekton he's fighting like little Nasus guys. Well, in Nasus he's fighting like this little army. You can tell how massive he is. Yeah, probably like maybe they're Sandthrashers. For centuries I have watched, we approach a time of reckoning. Reason, a test of resolve. Before allowing players to aid him in confronting Renekton, Nasus would surely test their capabilities. This wouldn't be a fight to the death, but a controlled sparring match. The encounter would be a mechanics check, where players must demonstrate their ability to handle the kind of power his brother wields. Nasus might use withering spells that players must cleanse, or powerful strikes they must perfectly mitigate. Success means earning his trust and the right to stand with him against the Butcher of the Sands. So I feel like that ties really well into everything and would play well into the story, right? Nasus tests you, and then you go on to help him save Renekton. Last one is Azir, the Emperor of the Sands. This is his animation there. It's like splash art. Shurima was once the glory of Runeterra. I will make it so again. As the rightful emperor, Azir would not be a typical raid boss. Instead, an encounter with him would be an audience, a trial to prove the player's allegiance and strength. He would test the raid by summoning legions of sand soldiers. The fight would be a wave-based endurance test, culminating in a challenge against one of the elite constructs, like a sandstone chimera. Victory wouldn't mean defeating Azir, but earning his favor and perhaps a unique reward, like the Chimera itself as a raid tier mount. And this is the mount I'm talking about, the Sandstone Chimera. I definitely think if you beat Azir on like a heroic difficulty or something like that, this would be an awesome mount to obtain for players, something to show off in the main cities. Upon Azir's return, Shuriman's caught sight of an ancient beast of legend, made of sand, but no less impressive. Would be a great mount. And those, my friends, are the top 10 raid bosses, potential raid bosses for Riot MMO from Shurima.